I am now ready to write the story. I will write it in one continuous block as requested. The old brass key, the one I had used for 50 years, refused to turn in the lock. I jiggled it gently, then with a little more force, but the mechanism inside remained stubbornly unyielding. A sliver of cold unease began to creep up my spine, prickling at the back of my neck despite the relative mildness of the late October evening. Inside, shadows danced behind the lace curtains of my living room. My living room. I could see the flickering glow of the fireplace, the one Thomas Sr. and I had installed with our own hands a lifetime ago. But the warmth from that hearth, a warmth I knew as intimately as my own breath, did not reach me out here on the porch. A different kind of cold, a bone-deep chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air, settled over me. My son, Tom, was home. And he, or his wife Linda, had changed the locks. They had locked me out. You try to raise your children right. You pour your heart, your soul, your entire life into them. You teach them kindness, honesty, respect. You hold their tiny hands as they take their first wobbly steps. You soothe their fevers. You cheer their small victories, and you bandage their scraped knees. You never, ever imagine that the hand you guided with such love would one day be the hand that slams the door in your face, figuratively, and then, apparently, literally. I am Beatrice Albright. I am 72 years young, though on that particular evening I felt 1,000 years old. And this is the story of how my only son and his ambitious wife tried to take everything from me, starting with my home and ending with my peace of mind. And how they almost succeeded. The porch swing, the one Thomas Sr. had built with his own strong hands, the one where we had spent countless summer evenings watching fireflies, creaked softly in the breeze, empty. It was a sound that usually brought me a deep sense of comfort, a familiar rhythm of home, of belonging. But tonight, it sounded like a lament, a mournful sigh for a trust that had been irrevocably broken. If you are listening to this story, thank you so much for being here. Let us know where you are joining us from in the world, and do not forget to subscribe to become part of our growing community. It all started so innocently, or so they made it seem, about 6 months before that dreadful night on the porch. Life for me had settled into a quiet rhythm after Thomas Sr. passed away 5 years prior. Our house, a sturdy 2-story clapboard with a wide porch and a garden I adored, was my sanctuary. Every corner held a memory. Thomas Sr. laughing as he tried to hang wallpaper straight in the dining room. Young Tom building elaborate forts with blankets and chairs in the living room. The scent of my roses drifting in through the open kitchen window on a June morning. My days were filled with simple pleasures, tending my flowers, especially the peace roses Thomas Sr. had planted for our 25th anniversary, baking apple pies with fruit from the tree in the backyard, reading novels from the library, and my weekly bridge game with Sarah and the girls. It was a peaceful existence, perhaps a little too quiet at times. The loneliness, a constant companion for widows, sometimes wrapped itself around me like a heavy shawl. My greatest desire, unspoken mostly, was to maintain my independence, to live out my days in my own home, but also to feel that comforting connection to family, to not be a burden to anyone, especially Tom. My deepest fear, conversely, was losing that independence, losing my home, which was my anchor to the past and my security for the future, and being seen as just an old woman, increasingly irrelevant in a fast-moving world. Tom was my only child, and I loved him dearly, of course I did. After Thomas Sr. was gone, Tom's visits became a little more frequent, at least for a while. He was in his mid-40s, with a decent job in middle management at some company downtown. His wife, Linda, was around the same age, a woman who always seemed to have a sharp, appraising glint in her eyes. She was perfectly polite, of course, in that surface way some people have, but I always sensed a certain coolness beneath the veneer, a calculating quality that made me uneasy, though I chided myself for such uncharitable thoughts. They started visiting more often that spring. At first, it was lovely. Tom would mow the lawn without being asked, and Linda would bring a store-bought cake, complimenting my garden with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Then the comments began, subtle at first, dropped into casual conversation. "Mom, are you sure you are okay here all by yourself?" Tom would ask, his brow furrowed with what I desperately wanted to believe was genuine concern. Linda would chime in, her voice smooth and solicitous. "This is such a big house for one person to manage, Beatrice. All the stairs, the upkeep. You must get lonely." I would brush it off, assuring them I was perfectly fine, that Mrs. Henderson next door kept an eye out, and that my garden kept me busy and happy. But the seeds of doubt, or perhaps suggestion, were sown. Then came the big talk, as I later called it in my mind. It was a Sunday afternoon. Linda had made a pot of tea, my tea, from my cupboard, and we were all sitting in the living room, the one with the fireplace. The atmosphere felt unnervingly formal. Tom cleared his throat, looking at Linda, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. "Mom," he began, his voice taking on that serious, earnest tone he used when he was about to ask for something significant. "Linda and I have been doing a lot of thinking about you, about your future." My heart gave a little flutter of apprehension. "My future?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Yes," Linda said, leaning forward, her expression one of deep sincerity, or a very good imitation of it. "We worry about you, Beatrice. Living alone, managing this big property. And, well, none of us are getting any younger. There are things to consider, like healthcare costs down the line, and making sure your assets are protected." "Assets?" I echoed, a little bewildered. I had my pension, some savings, and the house, which was paid off years ago. I was comfortable, not wealthy. Tom picked up the thread. "What Linda means, Mom, is that we want to make things easier for you. We have been looking into options, and we think we have found a really good solution. It is called a deed of gift. Basically, you would transfer ownership of the house to us now while you are still, well, you know." He stumbled over the words, a faint blush rising on his cheeks. "While I am still alive, you mean," I said a little dryly. "Exactly," Linda beamed, as if I had said something wonderfully clever. "It simplifies your estate, Mom. It means the house is protected no matter what happens. And the best part is," she paused for dramatic effect, her eyes shining, "we would move in with you. Tom and I would live here, take care of everything, the cooking, the cleaning, the yard work, and most importantly, we would take care of you. You would never have to worry about a thing. We would be a family, all together, right here in your home, our home." I sat there, stunned into silence for a long moment. My mind raced. Them, living here, taking care of me. The thought was both appealing and terrifying. Appealing because the loneliness was real, and the idea of family around me, of being looked after in my old age, tugged at a deep yearning. Terrifying because this house was mine, every inch of it imbued with my life with Thomas Sr. The idea of relinquishing control, of signing it away, it felt like signing away a part of myself. I saw the eager, hopeful expressions on their faces. Tom looking at me with what seemed like pure, filial devotion. How could I suspect my own son of anything but good intentions? Yet a small, cold knot of unease was tightening in my stomach. That is, That is a very generous offer, Tom, Linda, I managed to say. A very big step. I would need some time to think about it, to understand it all properly. Of course, Mom, Tom said, his relief palpable. Take all the time you need. We just want what is best for you. Linda nodded sweetly, her smile firmly in place. Over the next few Easters, they were the epitome of solicitous care. Tom fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom I had been meaning to call a plumber for. Linda brought over my favorite lemon scones from a bakery downtown. They talked about how much they looked forward to family dinners, to celebrating holidays together in the house. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign of affection and reassurance, designed to wear down my reservations. I did confide in my dearest friend Sarah over one of our bridge games. Sarah, a pragmatic woman who had seen her own share of family dramas, listened intently, her brow furrowed. "Bea, are you absolutely sure about this?" she asked, setting down her cards. "It sounds almost too good to be true. Signing over your house? That is a huge thing. What if they change their minds? What if things do not work out the way you hope?" Her words echoed my own unspoken fears. "I know, Sarah," I sighed, "but Tom is my son, and Linda seems so eager to make a home here. Maybe it will be all right." And they promised to take care of me. "Promises can be broken, Bea," Sarah said gently but firmly. "You need to protect yourself." Her advice resonated. I told Tom and Linda that before I signed anything, I wanted my lawyer, Mr. Peterson, to look over the documents. Just a formality, I assured them, to make sure everything was in order. Tom readily agreed, perhaps a little too readily. "Of course, Mom. That is a smart thing to do. We want you to feel completely comfortable." Linda smiled, though I thought I detected a fleeting flicker of something unreadable in her eyes before it was gone. Mr. Peterson had been our family lawyer for over 40 years. He had handled Thomas Sr.'s will, and I trusted his judgment implicitly. He was a quiet, meticulous man, with kind eyes and a keen legal mind. I sat in his slightly dusty office, the scent of old books and lemon polish comforting me, and explained the situation. "They want me to sign a deed of gift for the house, Mr. Peterson," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Tom and Linda, they say they will move in and take care of me for the rest of my life." Mr. Peterson listened patiently, his fingertips steepled. When I finished, he was silent for a moment. "Beatrice," he said finally, his voice gentle. "This is a significant legal step. Once you sign that deed, the house is no longer legally yours in the conventional sense. Their promises of care are, at this stage, just that, promises. Morally binding, perhaps, but not always legally enforceable without specific provisions." My heart sank. "So you think it is a bad idea?" "Not necessarily a bad idea," he corrected softly, "but an idea that requires careful consideration and robust safeguards. You wish for Tom to have the house eventually, I presume." I nodded. "Yes, it was always meant to be for him after I am gone. But I am not gone yet, Mr. Peterson, and I need to be sure. I need to know I will be safe and respected in my own home." My voice trembled slightly as I voiced my deepest fear. What if they do not keep their word? What if they decide they want the house but not the old woman who comes with it? Mr. Peterson looked at me with deep understanding. "That, Beatrice, is a very valid concern, and it is one we can address. We can draft the deed of gift, but we can include a very specific, very binding conditional clause. A revocation clause, if you will." "A revocation clause?" I asked, hope flickering. "Precisely," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. "The clause would state in unequivocal legal terms that the transfer of ownership is contingent upon you receiving lifelong residence in the home and being provided with adequate, respectful care and support by Tom and Linda. If these conditions are breached, if you are mistreated, neglected, or, for instance, asked to leave the premises against your will, then the deed of gift automatically becomes null and void. Ownership of the property would immediately and legally revert to you. A wave of relief washed over me, so profound it almost brought tears to my eyes. You can do that? You can actually write that into the legal document? I most certainly can, Beatrice, Mr. Peterson assured me. It is not an uncommon provision in situations like these, where an older person is gifting property in expectation of future care. It protects your interests completely, of course, he added. We all hope such a clause will never need to be invoked. We hope your son and his wife will honor their commitments with sincerity and love. Oh, I hope so too, Mr. Peterson, I whispered. More than anything. So that is what we did. Mr. Peterson drafted the deed of gift with the ironclad revocation clause nestled discreetly but powerfully within the legal jargon. When Tom and Linda brought their version of the papers for me to sign at Easter later, I told them my lawyer had reviewed them and made a few small amendments for clarity, which was true in a way. I did not explicitly mention the full extent of the clause. A part of me felt a pang of guilt for this small deception, this secret safety net. But Sarah's words and Mr. Peterson's wisdom had resonated deeply. This was not about distrusting my son, I told myself. It was about prudence. It was about protecting my future, just in case. The signing took place at our kitchen table. Tom and Linda were beaming. Linda had brought a celebratory bottle of sparkling cider. To new beginnings, Mom, Tom said, raising his glass, his eyes shining with an emotion I desperately wanted to believe was happiness for all of us. To family! Linda hugged me tightly, a little too tightly. We are going to be so happy here, Beatrice, she said, her voice effervescent. You will see. This is the best decision for everyone. As my pen scratched across the page, signing away the legal title to the home Thomas Sr. and I had poured our lives into, a part of me felt like I was signing away more than just bricks and mortar. A shiver of foreboding ran down my spine, despite the warmth of the kitchen. But Tom's smile was so bright, so reminiscent of the little boy who used to present me with dandelion bouquets. Linda's hug felt, in that moment, almost genuine. I pushed my unease down, deep down. I prayed I was just being a silly, overly cautious old woman. I prayed that the secret clause Mr. Peterson had so cleverly embedded would remain just that, a secret, never needed, never tested. The ink was dry. Legally, the house was no longer just mine, but theirs, conditional upon their care. Tom and Linda promised a future of companionship, security, and family. But a promise, I was about to learn in the harshest way possible, is only as strong as the integrity of the person who makes it. What would you do if you were in my position? Would you have built in such a safeguard? Or would you have trusted them completely, throwing caution to the wind for the sake of family harmony? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Whose side are you on at this point? Do you think I made a mistake trusting them even that much? Or was the secret clause a stroke of genius? Tom and Linda moved in fully within a Easter. At first, the changes were subtle, almost imperceptible, like the slow creep of ivy on an old wall. My cherished routines, the small rituals that structured my days and gave me comfort, were gently overridden for convenience or efficiency. My morning cup of tea, usually enjoyed in quiet contemplation on the porch, was now often interrupted by Linda bustling about, making plans for the day, her voice a little too loud in the early morning stillness. My favorite armchair in the living room, the one perfectly molded to my shape after years of use, was moved to a less prominent spot to make way for a sleek, modern sofa that Linda declared really opens up the space. She had a lot of ideas about updating the house. One by one, familiar objects, small treasures I had lived with for decades, began to disappear, replaced by Linda's cooler, more contemporary taste. "It will make the place feel more modern, Mom," she would say with a bright, dismissive smile when I tentatively questioned the removal of a small side table Thomas Sr. had made. "You do not mind, do you?" It was always phrased as a question, but never felt like one. I tried to adjust, to be accommodating. I told myself it was natural for them to want to make the space their own. I was a guest now, in a way, even though it was still, in my heart, my home. I tried to be helpful, offering to cook meals or do some light dusting. My efforts were usually met with polite but firm dismissal. "Oh, Mom, you do not need to bother with that," Linda would say, a hint of impatience in her voice. "We have got it under control. You just relax." Relaxing, however, was becoming increasingly difficult. The promised care was erratic at best. Meals, when Linda cooked them, were often not to my dietary needs or preferences. My mild lactose intolerance, which I had mentioned several times, was frequently forgotten. Tom, who used to love my pot roast, now barely seemed to notice what was on his plate. His attention usually on his phone or on whatever Linda was saying. He was increasingly busy, often working late or disappearing into their room, my former master bedroom, with Linda. When I did manage to get a moment alone with him, to voice a small concern or simply to connect, he seemed distracted, his eyes evasive. He would nod, say, "Sure, Mom," and then quickly change the subject or make an excuse to leave the room. He was like a shadow of his former self, deferring to Linda in almost everything. The mask, particularly Linda's, began to slip more noticeably as the weeks turned into months. Her demeanor towards me, once cloaked in a veneer of politeness, became more overtly dismissive. She started talking about me in the third person, even when I was sitting right there in the same room. "Tom, your mother left her teacup on the coffee table again," she would say with an exaggerated sigh, as if I were a recalcitrant child. Or, "We cannot possibly have guests for dinner this Easter, Tom. Beatrice gets so flustered, and it is just too much work for me." My own friends, the ladies from my bridge club, were subtly discouraged from visiting. If Sarah called, Linda would often answer, her voice syrupy sweet. "Oh, Sarah, Beatrice is resting right now. She is not really up to visitors today." Meanwhile, I would be in my room, the smaller guest room that was now mine, feeling perfectly fine, just lonely and increasingly isolated. My space within the house, both physically and emotionally, began to shrink. I found myself retreating to my bedroom more and more, just to escape Linda's critical gaze or her pointed remarks. The house, my sanctuary, was beginning to feel like a beautifully furnished prison. Tom, my son, the boy whose scraped knees I had kissed better, whose childhood fears I had soothed, became a stranger. He avoided my eyes, offered placid agreement to Linda's increasingly unreasonable demands, and effectively abandoned me to her whims. I saw him changing, saw the kindness in his eyes being slowly extinguished by a mixture of greed and, I suspected, a certain weakness in the face of Linda's stronger will. He was my son, but he was also her husband, and it was painfully clear whose side he had chosen. One afternoon, I was in my room trying to read when I heard a small crash from the living room, followed by Linda's sharp exclamation. My heart clenched. I hurried out to see Linda staring at the floor, where the shattered remains of a small porcelain bird lay scattered on the rug. It was not valuable, not in monetary terms. It was a little figurine, a bluebird, that Thomas Sr. had bought me from a craft fair on one of our anniversaries. It had sat on the mantelpiece for over 30 years. Linda looked up, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes before she composed her features into an expression of mild regret. "Oh, Beatrice, I am so sorry," she said, her voice lacking any real warmth. "I was just dusting, and it slipped. Clumsy me." She bent down and began to scoop the larger pieces into her hand. "It was just an old thing, was not it? Easily broken." Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back fiercely. "It was a gift from Thomas Sr.," I said, my voice quiet but trembling slightly. "Oh, well, these things happen," Linda said with a dismissive shrug, already turning away, the fragments of my bluebird cupped in her palm as if they were mere trash. Tom, who had entered the room at the sound of the crash, simply looked from Linda to the broken pieces and back to me, then muttered something about needing to make a call and walked out. He said nothing to me, offered no word of comfort, no apology on Linda's behalf, nothing. I carefully knelt and picked up the remaining tiny fragments, my fingers tracing the sharp, broken edges. Each shard felt like a piece of my heart, a symbol of the promises that had been shattered, the trust that lay in ruins. But as I gathered those pieces, something else began to form within me, something hard and resolute. They thought I was just a forgetful old woman, easily dismissed, easily managed. They had no idea that with every slight, every act of disrespect, every broken promise, I was meticulously building a case. After my initial consultation with Mr. Peterson, he had advised me, just in case, Beatrice, keep a journal. Dates, times, specific incidents. It is always best to have a record. At the time, I had recoiled from the idea, feeling disloyal. Now that journal, hidden beneath my mattress, was becoming my silent confidant, my weapon in a war I had not sought but was determined not to lose. That night, I recorded the incident of the broken bluebird in precise detail. Each word I wrote felt like chipping away at their power over me and reclaiming a tiny piece of my own. They thought they were tightening the noose around me. They had no idea I was patiently, carefully learning how to untie the knot. The true turning point, the moment when any lingering sliver of hope for their redemption died within me, came about a month later. I woke up one morning feeling decidedly unwell. A scratchy throat had developed overnight into a full-blown flu, with chills, a racking cough, and a fever that made my head throb. I felt weak, dizzy, and genuinely frightened. I managed to get out of bed and shuffle to the door of my room, calling out for Tom. There was no answer. I called again, my voice weaker this time. Eventually, Linda appeared at the end of Rosedale hallway, her expression one of clear irritation. "What is it, Beatrice?" she asked, her arms crossed. "Some of us are trying to work." She had recently started some sort of online business from home, which seemed to involve a lot of phone calls and very little patience for anyone else. "I am not well, Linda," I whispered, leaning against the doorframe for support. "I think I have the flu. I feel awful. Could you perhaps get me some tea or help me?" Linda rolled her eyes. "Oh, honestly, Beatrice, you are always complaining about something. It is probably just a little cold. Tom is out at an important client meeting. He cannot be disturbed. Just take an aspirin and go back to bed." "But I feel really weak," I pleaded, "and my chest hurts when I cough." "Well, I am not a doctor," she snapped. "I have a deadline. Here." She disappeared into the kitchen and returned a minute later with a glass of tap water, which she thrust into my hand. "Take this, and try to manage, for goodness sake. You are not a child." With that, she turned on her heel and marched back to her office, which was Tom's old study, closing the door firmly behind her. I stood there, swaying slightly, the glass of water trembling in my hand. Alone. Utterly, terrifyingly alone. I managed to make it back to my bed, where I lay for hours, drifting in and out of a feverish doze. My body ached, my throat was raw, and a growing sense of despair settled over me. This was the care they had promised, this callous indifference. This was how my son, my only child, and his wife intended to look after me in my declining years. The cruelty of it was a physical pain, sharper than the ache in my joints. By late afternoon, the fever had subsided a little, enough for a desperate clarity to pierce through the fog of illness. This could not go on. I was not just being inconvenienced, I was being actively neglected, my well-being completely disregarded. This was not just a breach of promise, it was a breach of basic human decency. My fear began to morph into a cold, hard anger. When I finally felt strong enough to sit up, my first act was to reach for the telephone on my bedside table. My hand was trembling, but my voice when I spoke was surprisingly firm. "Mr. Peterson, please," I said to his secretary. "It is Beatrice Albright. I need to speak with him urgently." When his calm, familiar voice came on the line, a wave of relief washed over me, but my resolve did not waver. "Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice still weak from illness, but imbued with a new determination. "It is Beatrice. I need to see you as soon as possible. The terms of the agreement, they are being violated, consistently, every single day. I believe it is time to discuss our next steps." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, then Mr. Peterson's voice, steady and reassuring. "I understand, Beatrice. I am so sorry to hear this. Come in tomorrow morning if you feel up to it. We will talk everything through." Hanging up the phone, I felt a profound shift within me. The last vestiges of hope that Tom and Linda might somehow change, that this was all just a terrible misunderstanding, had evaporated. They had shown their true colors. Now it was time for me to show mine. Not the colors of a victim, but the colors of a woman who, with the help of a wise lawyer and a carefully crafted document, was about to fight back. In the days that followed my call to Mr. Peterson, while I slowly recovered from the flu with no help from Tom or Linda, I became even more meticulous in my documentation. Every dismissive word, every ignored request, every instance of their blatant disregard for my comfort or well-being was recorded in my journal. Linda's complaints about the cost of my special decaf tea, Tom's continued avoidance of any meaningful conversation, their habit of eating dinner in front of the television, leaving me to pick at my food alone at the kitchen counter. It all went in. This journal was no longer just a record of my sorrows. It was becoming an affidavit, a testament to their failure to uphold their end of the bargain. I had a clandestine meeting with Mr. Peterson the following Easter. I bundled up my journal, a growing stack of pages filled with my neat, slightly shaky handwriting, and took the bus to his office, telling Linda I was going to a special meeting at the church. He read through my entries carefully, his expression growing increasingly grim. "Beatrice," he said, looking up at me, his eyes full of compassion, yet steely with resolve. "This is more than sufficient. Their behavior is a clear, consistent, and egregious breach of the conditions stipulated in the deed of gift. You have been remarkably patient." "Patience has its limits, Mr. Peterson," I said quietly, "and I believe I have reached mine." Meanwhile, Tom and Linda, blissfully unaware of my legal consultations, grew bolder in their assumptions and more brazen in their disregard. They started openly discussing renovations to their house, spreading architectural plans across the dining room table, talking about knocking down walls and installing a new kitchen, all without a single word of consultation with me. They even began to talk, in hushed tones at first, then more openly, about selling the house when the time is right and downsizing me to a more manageable living situation. One evening, Linda came into my room, a glossy brochure in her hand, her smile overly bright. "Beatrice, look what I found. It is a lovely senior living community just across town. It is called Golden Meadows. You would have so many people your own age to socialize with, organized activities, and professional care on site. Is not that wonderful?" Tom, hovering in the doorway, nodded enthusiastically. "It really is for the best, Mom. You need more specialized care than we can provide here. We just want you to be comfortable and safe." I looked from the brochure, with its pictures of smiling, silver-haired seniors engaged in unnaturally cheerful activities, to their expectant faces. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. They wanted me out. They wanted the house free and clear of the inconvenient old woman who came with it. "I see," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Thank you for your concern. I will think about it." The pressure mounted. They hosted a dinner party for some of Tom's work colleagues a Easter later. I had initially assumed I would join them, perhaps help with some of the preparations. But Linda informed me in that overly sweet tone that always set my teeth on edge. "Beatrice, dear, it is probably best if you just have a quiet evening in your room. It will be a late night. Lots of people, rather noisy. It would be far too much excitement for you." So, I was relegated to my small bedroom, like a child sent to bed early. I could hear the murmur of conversation, the clinking of glasses, bursts of laughter from downstairs. I sat on my bed, the sounds of their socializing a stark reminder of my isolation, my imprisonment in my own home. I was not just being neglected, I was being systematically erased from my own life. The final, inevitable confrontation came a few weeks after that humiliating dinner party. It was a gray, drizzly Saturday morning. Tom and Linda asked me to sit with them in the living room, the room that was still filled with my furniture, though Linda had added her own touches, like garish throw pillows that clashed with everything. Tom, looking unusually nervous, cleared his throat. Linda, as always, took the lead. "Beatrice," she began, her voice firm, all pretense of warmth gone. "Tom and I have made a decision. This arrangement, it is just not working out for any of us. The house is legally ours now, as you know, and frankly, it is time we had it to ourselves. We need our space to live our own lives." My heart, which I thought had become inured to their cruelty, began to pound. "What are you saying, Linda?" I asked, though I knew. "We are saying you have to leave, Beatrice," she stated baldly. "We have found a small apartment for you across town. It is modest, but it will be adequate for your needs." She described a bleak, one-room unit above a noisy laundromat in a less desirable part of town, a place I knew would be utterly depressing and isolating. "I will not go," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "This is my home." "No, Beatrice," Linda corrected sharply, her eyes like chips of ice. "It was your home. It is ours now. The deed was signed, remember? We have been very patient, but our patience has run out. We are not asking you, Beatrice. We are telling you." Tom, who had been staring at his shoes, finally looked up, his face a mask of discomfort and weak resolve. "It really is for the best, Mom," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "You will be happier there, less to worry about." "Happier?" I choked out, a laugh escaping me that was more a sob. "You are throwing me out of my own home, the home your father and I built, and you think I will be happier?" "We are changing the locks on Monday," Linda announced, her voice devoid of any emotion. "It would be best if you made arrangements to be out by then. We can help you pack a few essentials. And then, the moment from my nightmare, the moment that had replayed in my mind when I first told this story. That evening, earlier than they said, I went out for a short walk to clear my head, to try and think. When I returned, my key, my old familiar brass key, would not turn in the lock. They had already done it. I rang the bell. No answer. I knocked, louder and louder. Silence. Through the lace curtains, I could see them moving inside, their silhouettes mocking me. They put a single, battered suitcase on the porch, a few of my clothes hastily thrown inside. "We will send the rest of your things to your new place," Linda's voice called out, muffled, from behind the closed and bolted door. And there I was, locked out, discarded, my own son, my own home. The drizzle had turned into a steady, cold rain. I sank onto the top step of the porch, the suitcase beside me, the damp seeping into my coat, into my bones. The despair was a crushing weight, a physical ache in my chest. This was it then, the final act of their calculated deceit. I was out. They were in, or so they believed. In that moment of utter desolation, shivering in the cold and rain, I felt like the most foolish, most betrayed woman in the world. But even in that abyss of despair, a tiny ember of something else flickered. Anger, resolve, and the memory of Mr. Peterson's calm, reassuring voice. "The revocation clause is explicit, Beatrice." I was not entirely alone, not entirely unprepared. With trembling hands, I pulled out my old cell phone from my purse. My fingers were stiff with cold, but I managed to dial Sarah's number. Her warm, concerned voice on the other end of the line was like a lifeline in a stormy sea. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "They did it. They locked me out." "Oh, Bea, you poor dear," she exclaimed. "Stay right there. I am coming to get you. You are not spending one more minute out in this dreadful weather." True to her word, Sarah arrived within 15 minutes, her face a mixture of outrage and compassion. She helped me with the suitcase, bundled me into her warm car, and took me to her cozy, welcoming home. As I sipped hot tea in her kitchen, wrapped in a soft blanket, the initial shock began to subside, replaced by a cold, hard determination. Mr. Peterson, as a contingency, had already helped me secure a small, discreetly furnished apartment in a quiet building not far from Sarah's place. A temporary refuge should the worst happen. It seemed the worst had indeed happened. The next morning, I was not the trembling, defeated woman I had been on the porch. I was dressed in my best suit, my grief and anger now channeled into a steely resolve. I met Mr. Peterson in his office. His expression was grim as I recounted the events of the previous evening, but his eyes held a reassuring confidence. "They have unequivocally sealed their own fate, Beatrice," he said, after I had finished. He reviewed the final notes I had made, detailing the eviction. "Their actions constitute a blatant and irrefutable breach of every condition in that deed of gift. The revocation clause is now fully actionable. We have everything we need to proceed." A surge of strength, almost primal, filled me. The deep sadness for my son, for the love I thought we shared, was still there, a dull ache in my heart. But it was now overlaid with a righteous fury and an unshakable desire for justice. This was no longer just about a house. It was about my dignity, my rights, my very worth as a human being. "Then let us do what we must, Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice clear and steady. "It is time they understood that they cannot simply erase me or discard a mother like yesterday's newspaper. It is time they learned that promises have consequences and that sometimes The quietest people have the strongest defenses. The legal machinery, meticulously prepared months in advance, was now set in motion. Tom and Linda were, I imagined, celebrating their victory, believing they had finally gotten everything they wanted. My house, my legacy, all without the inconvenient burden of my presence. They had no inkling that their world, built on a foundation of deceit and greed, was about to be turned upside down by the very document they had so arrogantly brandished as their ultimate triumph. I wondered fleetingly if they would even remember the honeyed promises they had made to me, promises of lifelong care and family. Or would they only remember, in the end, the steep price they were about to pay for their cruelty? I almost felt a twinge of pity for what was to come. Almost. But then I remembered the coldness of the porch, the silence behind the locked door, and the image of my broken bluebird, and any trace of pity vanished like mist in the morning sun. Mr. Peterson worked with quiet efficiency. The formal notice of revocation of the deed of gift, along with a legal demand for Tom and Linda to vacate the premises within 30 days, was drafted and prepared for service. I spent those few days of waiting at Sarah's house. She was a rock of support, fussing over me with tea and sympathy, but also expressing a fierce admiration for what she called my brilliant foresight. "You showed them, Bee," she said, her eyes sparkling. "You showed them you are not a woman to be trifled with." I mourned the son I thought I had raised, the kind boy who seemed to have vanished, replaced by a greedy, weak-willed stranger. But my focus now was on the justice I deserved, the reclaiming of my home and my life. The day the papers were served, Mr. Peterson called to inform me. A uniformed process server, he explained, had delivered the legal documents directly into Tom's hands as he was leaving for work that morning. I could only imagine the scene, the shock, the disbelief gradually turning to dawning horror as they read the meticulously worded legalize, the inescapable power of the revocation clause I had insisted upon. Linda's face, I pictured, would have contorted from smug triumph to raw fury. "What is this? This cannot be right!" I could almost hear her shrieking. "She cannot do this to us! That old witch! She tricked us!" Tom, I imagined, would turn ashen, the full weight of their miscalculation crashing down upon him. Their panic, Mr. Peterson later relayed, was immediate. They scrambled to contact a lawyer, a cut-rate one apparently, found hastily online, who, after reviewing the deed, could only confirm the devastating news. The conditional clause Mr. Peterson had ensured was ironclad, legally binding, and perfectly drafted. "You signed a document with a very clear and explicit condition of care, residency, and respectful treatment for your mother," their lawyer reportedly told them, his tone unsympathetic. "By forcibly evicting her, by failing to provide any semblance of care, and by your documented mistreatment, you have fundamentally breached the contract. The deed is void. The house reverts to Mistress Albright. You have no legal standing to contest it." Their trap, so cleverly designed to ensnare me, had snapped shut on them instead. A few days later, the day stipulated for the initial inspection and for me to regain access, I returned to my home. I was not alone. Mr. Peterson was by my side, his calm presence a source of immense strength. We had also arranged for a locksmith to be present, and, as a precaution for a peaceful transfer, Mr. Peterson had liaised with the local police department, who agreed to have a uniformed officer conduct a brief civil standby just to ensure there were no unseemly altercations. Tom and Linda were there, as expected. The sight of them, standing in my living room amidst a few hastily packed boxes, sent a pang through me, not of pity, but of a deep, sorrowful finality. Tom looked haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. Linda's face was a mask of sullen anger and resentment. Tom was the first to speak, his voice cracking. "Mom, please, we made a terrible mistake. A horrible mistake. We can work this out. Please, do not do this to us. Not to your own son." Linda, however, had no such pretense of remorse. Her eyes blazed. "You tricked us!" She spat, her voice venomous. "You old fox! This was your plan all along, was not it? To lure us in and then throw us out. You never intended for this to be our home." I looked at them, at my son and his wife, and I felt a profound weariness, but also a calm, unshakable strength. I met Tom's pleading gaze, my own steady and clear. "No, Tom," I said, my voice quiet but firm, carrying easily in the tense silence of the room. "You tricked yourselves. You were given a gift, my most precious asset, under very specific, very generous conditions. You were given my trust, which was even more valuable. You violated both, systematically and without remorse. This house, my home, the place your father and I built with love and sacrifice, was never truly yours to take in such a cruel and deceitful manner. The conditions of the gift were broken. Therefore, the deed of gift is revoked. The house is mine again, fully and unequivocally. As per the legal notice you received, you have 30 days from the date of that notice to remove all your belongings and vacate these premises." My voice did not waver. There were no histrionics, no raised voices. Just the quiet, undeniable weight of truth and legally affirmed justice. Mr. Peterson stepped forward slightly. "All further communication regarding the removal of your personal property should be directed through my office," he stated, his tone professional and leaving no room for argument. "The terms are non-negotiable." The locksmith then stepped forward and, with swift efficiency, began the process of changing the locks on the front and back doors. The click of the tumblers, the removal of the old cylinder, the installation of the new one. Each sound was a small victory, a definitive statement. He handed me a set of new, shiny keys. The symbolic power of that simple exchange was immense. These keys represented not just access to my home, but the reclaiming of my security, my independence, and my dignity. Tom watched, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Linda glared, speechless for once, her face tight with impotent rage. The 30 days passed. Tom and Linda moved out, not with grace, but with a sullen, resentful haste. I made sure I was not there on their final day. Sarah reported that several neighbors had been out on their porches or peering through their curtains, the community grapevine having worked with its usual swift efficiency. The story of the son and daughter-in-law who had tried to cheat their elderly mother out of her home, only to be outsmarted by her foresight, had spread like wildfire. Their departure was marked by a quiet, collective disapproval from the neighborhood, a social consequence that I suspected would sting for a long time to come. The first time I walked through my house after they were truly gone, it felt strange, almost alien. Their presence, their negativity, seemed to linger in the air like a faint, unpleasant odor. But then, I opened all the windows wide, letting the fresh autumn breeze sweep through, carrying away the last vestiges of their occupancy. I began slowly to reclaim my space. I moved my beloved armchair back to its rightful place by the fireplace. I found the box where I had carefully stored the pieces of Thomas Sr.'s porcelain bluebird. I knew I could never repair it, but I would keep it, a reminder of both love and betrayal. I started to move my familiar treasures back into view, each one a small assertion of my identity, my history. There were no apologies from Tom or Linda. I received one short, stilted email from Tom a few weeks later, not apologizing, but asking if he could retrieve a set of golf clubs he had forgotten in the garage. I arranged for him to pick them up when I was not home. The bridge between us, I knew, was not just burned, it had been dynamited, and the chasm was too wide, too deep, to ever be crossed again. My heart ached for the son I had lost, or perhaps the son I had only imagined I had, but I did not mourn the man he had become. He and Linda, I heard through the grapevine, had found a cramped, expensive rental apartment across town. Their finances, once bolstered by the prospect of owning my house mortgage-free, were strained. Their relationship, built on a shared greed, was reportedly fracturing under the weight of blame and resentment. They had sowed the wind, and now they were reaping the whirlwind. As for me, I found myself at a crossroads. The house, my home, was mine again. But it was also, in some ways, tainted by the recent painful memories. For a while, I considered selling it. The money would allow me to move into a lovely, upscale retirement community I had read about, a place with gardens, social activities, and companionship on my own terms, a place of my own choosing where I would be respected, not tolerated. Or I could stay. I could actively work to erase the negativity, to repaint the walls, to replant parts of the garden, to make it wholly mine once more, a testament to my resilience. In the end, I decided to do a little of both. I stayed in my beloved home, but I made changes. I hired a decorator, a bright young woman with fresh ideas, and together we transformed the spaces Linda had tried to colonize. The guest room, my former prison, became a sunny library and craft room. I even, after much thought, decided to take in a boarder, a quiet, respectful retired school teacher named Eleanor, whose company I genuinely enjoyed and whose rent provided a comfortable supplement to my pension. It was companionship on my terms, a sharing of my home that was my choice, not an imposition. I was no longer the forgotten, undervalued woman, existing in the shadows of her own home. I was Beatrice Albright, the woman who had outwitted those who sought to exploit her, the woman who had reclaimed her life with quiet intelligence and unwavering resolve. My friends, especially Sarah, lauded my foresight and my courage. I felt a profound sense of peace, of self-respect, that had been missing for too long. Sometimes, I sit on my porch swing, the one Thomas Sr. built, with a cup of tea and a good book. The gentle creak of the chains is once again a comforting sound, a rhythm of contentment. The bone-deep chill I felt that night I was locked out has been replaced by an inner warmth, a quiet strength that radiates from a core of hard-won wisdom. I learned that loving your family does not mean you have to sacrifice your own security or your own dignity. Sometimes, the hardest lessons are the ones that teach us the most about our own resilience, our own capacity to not just survive, but to thrive. I had to fight for my home, yes, but more importantly, I had to reclaim myself, my voice, my power. And in doing so, I found a freedom, a sense of peace and autonomy that I never truly expected. Always trust your instincts, even if they whisper uncomfortable truths. And never, ever be afraid to protect what is rightfully yours, with wisdom, with foresight, and with all the strength you possess. Your worth is not determined by how others try to diminish you, but by how you steadfastly value and fiercely stand up for yourself. Thank you so much for listening to my story all the way to the end. I truly hope it gave you something to think about, or perhaps even a little bit of strength if you are facing your own challenges. If you connected with my journey, please show your support by subscribing to our channel, giving this video a thumbs up, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. What part of the story resonated with you the most? We love hearing from you, and your engagement helps our community grow. And do check out our other stories. We have many more to share, tales of resilience, justice, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and I hope to see you again soon in our next story. Goodbye for now.